I was standing in the fellowship hall of St. Luke's Church when my stepdaughter, with her chin held high and her gaze fixed firmly on me, spoke words so sharp and clear they rang out like a bell. "The best gift you could give me for my wedding," she declared, "would be if you disappeared from our family forever." The room fell into complete silence. Folding chairs scattered about, white tablecloths covering the tables, and a half-empty tray of sugar cookies. I was waiting for my wife to brush it off with a laugh, for her to say something, anything, but she didn't. Sarah just nodded, and that moment, though quiet and without any theatrical flair, felt like a door quietly closing inside my chest. 3 weeks later, they would be back in that same hall, voices raised, faces flushed, staring at an empty house, wondering how everything had unraveled so quickly. But right then, in that still room, all I did was take a breath and count to 3. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I simply looked at Jessica, 28 years old, her hair tightly pulled back, the wedding binder clutched against her chest like a shield, and said, "All right." She blinked, clearly taken off guard by my response. Now, let me take a step back. My name's John Harris. That spring, I was 56, living in Maple Grove, Minnesota. I'd spent most of my life as an electrician. 34 years of early mornings, cold basements, and hands that never seemed to stop tingling. Even when I tried to rest, my knuckles were swollen, my fingers half-numb from years of twisting wires and tightening screws. Sarah and I had been married for 12 years. She came with a daughter, Jessica, who was 16 when I first met her. Her real father was long gone. I never tried to step into his shoes. I just showed up. I handled school pickups, flat tires, and driving lessons in the high school parking lot. I taught her how to parallel park in my old Ford F-150, my foot always hovering over the brake, my voice steady. Even when she hit the curb, she used to call me John, then Dad, but somewhere along the way, she stopped calling me anything at all. Our house, our home, was nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by crabapple trees and mailboxes shaped like tiny barns. I made the down payment, and my name was on the mortgage, along with Sarah's. Jessica liked to call it a family home, especially when she'd talk about hosting bridal showers and pre-wedding dinners there. The wedding had completely consumed everything. Venues, caterers, florists. Jessica's voice blaring from speakerphone while Sarah paced the kitchen, nodding and smiling, saying, "Of course, sweetheart." I didn't mind footing most of the bill. After all, that's what you do for the people you love. I told myself, you invest in the ones who matter. The meeting at the church was supposed to be straightforward. Final head count, seating arrangements, who would sit where. Jessica stood at the front, flipping through her binder like she was running the show. Then she cleared her throat. "There's just one more thing," she said, looking first at Sarah and then at me. "I don't want any awkwardness on my wedding day." Sarah shifted in her seat, and I recognized that move. It was the one she made when she didn't want to pick sides. Jessica continued, her voice steady but direct. "People might get confused. I mean, you're not really my dad." I gave a small nod. It didn't hurt as much as she probably thought. Then she dropped the bomb. "It would mean a lot if you just stepped back. Completely." I waited, letting her finish. "The greatest gift," she added, "would be if you disappeared from our family forever." I turned to Sarah. 12 years of marriage. Shared everything, bank accounts, quiet Sunday mornings. I looked at her, searching for something, anything, but she just nodded. It was as if the air around us had thickened. The ticking of the clock on the wall grew louder. Tick, tick, tick. "All right," I said again, my voice barely above a whisper. That night, I packed a small duffel bag, just some jeans, work shirts, and my toothbrush. I left everything else behind. The family photos. The couch I'd repaired twice. The garage shelves I built with my own hands. Sarah watched me from the bedroom doorway. "John," she said, like she was about to say more, but she didn't. I left my house keys on the counter next to the wedding binder. I spent that first night in my truck, parked behind a Perkins off Highway 94. The smell of bacon grease wafted through the air every time the door opened. I sat there with a cup of bad coffee, my hands wrapped around it, staring at nothing. By morning, my phone was flooded with messages, missed calls, confused texts, Jessica asking what I was trying to pull, Sarah asking where I was. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to work, pulled wire, tightened screws, did my job. The world didn't stop just because my marriage had. During lunch, I sat in my truck and opened the mortgage app on my phone. There it was. The payment I'd been making for years, the loan I'd taken out without thinking much about it, the insurance policy in my name, the deed I'd signed without much care at the time. Disappear. I thought, all right, I will. But disappearing didn't mean vanishing into thin air. It meant stepping away, quietly, and letting everything they relied on feel the absence. I started the truck and drove toward town, heading for a real estate office I'd passed by 100 times before. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just done. I didn't go straight to the office. I drove past it once, then circled the block, my blinker clicking in time with my thoughts. I wasn't shaking. That surprised me. I'd always imagined a moment like this would come with anger, maybe shouting, a cracked windshield, or a slammed door. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped me out and forgotten to put anything back. I pulled into a gas station, filled the truck, and sat there longer than I needed to. An old man at the next pump nodded at me. We exchanged a glance, one of those quiet, unspoken understandings men our age share. No words, just a simple acknowledgement. Still here? Still breathing? I checked my phone again. Another message from Sarah. John, this has gone far enough. We need to talk. I typed a response, erased it, typed again. Then I locked the screen and slid the phone into the console. Talking was something they'd done. Deciding without me. Nodding along. By mid-afternoon, I found myself parked outside the Maple Grove branch of North Star Credit Union. The building was the same as always. Brick exterior, flags flying out front, a bench by the door. I'd been banking there since before Sarah. Inside, the air had that faint smell of carpet cleaner and printer toner. A young woman at the counter greeted me with a practiced smile. Hi, how can I help you? I need to look at a few accounts, I said. Joint ones. She nodded, tapping away at her keyboard, asking for my ID. Everything felt calm, ordinary. That was the strangest part. Life kept moving like nothing had changed. We went through the paperwork, the checking, the savings, the account we'd been using for wedding expenses. I didn't close anything yet. I just asked questions, took notes, and listened. When I walked out, I sat on the bench for a minute, watching the cars come and go. A woman struggled to buckle her toddler into a car seat. Someone laughed too loud inside the building. I felt older than I had that morning. That night, I stayed in a cheap extended stay motel off the interstate. Beige walls, a bed that sagged in the middle. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind drifting back to the house, the way the third step always creaked when you stepped on it, and the lingering scent of Sarah's shampoo still hanging in the bathroom. I thought about Jessica, 16, gripping the steering wheel so tight it looked like her knuckles might break. I'd coached her through her first left turn, telling her, easy, you've got time, though I wasn't sure I believed it at the time. The next morning, while Sarah was at work, I went back to the house. I used the spare key I still had. As I walked through the rooms, it felt like I was intruding on someone else's life, like the place had been set up for a show, and I was the uninvited guest. I packed up a few more things, my toolbox, a photo of my dad, the old flannel jacket I wore every fall. But I didn't touch anything that screamed husband. No wedding album, no matching mugs, no throw blankets Sarah liked to keep on the couch. The wedding binder sat exactly where I'd left it, with sticky notes, color-coded tabs, and everything organized down to the minute. I closed it gently. By the time Sarah came home that evening, my side of the closet was bare. She stood there with her arms crossed. You're really doing this, she said. I am, I answered. You're punishing us, she added. I looked at her, really looked, at the lines around her mouth, the way she couldn't meet my eyes. No, I said, I'm stepping back, like you wanted. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Jessica didn't mean it. she started, but I cut her off. She meant it, I said, and you agreed. That's when her expression shifted. Not anger, not sadness, but uncertainty. Like she was starting to realize that something was happening that she couldn't stop. The next few days were filled with escalating calls. Jessica left voicemails that switched from rage to desperation. "You can't just leave," she said in one, her voice tight with emotion. "Do you know how this looks?" Sarah's messages were quieter, pleading. "We can fix this. Please come home. You're hurting everyone." I didn't respond. Instead, I met with James Carter, a realtor I'd known for years. We sat across from each other in his cramped office, a pot of burnt coffee sitting between us. "You're serious?" he asked, flipping through the paperwork. "I am," I replied. He leaned back, sizing me up. "Fast sale or fast?" he asked. "Clean," I said. James nodded. "You know what that means?" "I do." Signing the listing agreement felt heavier than I'd anticipated, not because I doubted it, but because it made everything real. The house would sell. All the wedding plans tied to it would unravel. I knew that. That night, Sarah showed up at the motel, unannounced. She knocked until I opened the door. "You're tearing everything down," she said, her eyes blazing. "For what?" I didn't raise my voice. She laughed then, sharp and brittle. "You think this will end well?" she asked. "I think it will end," I said, honestly. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. The next morning, the for sale sign went up in the yard. By afternoon, my phone was blowing up. Jessica screamed. Sarah cried. Someone from the wedding venue called, confused, asking who still had authority to approve events at the house. I let it ring. "Disappear," they'd said. That's exactly what I was doing. Quietly, legally, one step at a time. The more I pulled away, the more I realized how much I'd been holding up their world, without so much as a thank you. But that realization didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. It felt more like the ground shifting under everyone's feet, including mine. By the end of the week, I understood something I hadn't when I first packed my duffel bag. Disappearing wasn't a single act. It wasn't a slammed door or some dramatic goodbye. It was a series of small absences, quietly pulling away piece by piece, like taking nails out of a board and watching it finally give way under its own weight. The house went live on a Thursday. James sent me a picture of the listing. Bright photos, wide angles. The lawn looked greener than I remembered. I stared at it for a long time, trying to feel something, regret, triumph, anything. But mostly I just felt tired. That night, I sat in a motel room with the TV on low, watching a weather forecast I didn't care about. My phone buzzed again. Sarah's message popped up. "Jessica's in tears. She says you're humiliating her." I put the phone face down, taking a few moments to just breathe. A few minutes later, the phone buzzed again. "Please, we can talk. Just come home." The word home felt distant now, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I thought back to our first winter in that house. The early mornings I spent shoveling the driveway so Sarah wouldn't slip. The time I fixed the furnace myself to save a few dollars. I remembered Jessica, bringing her friends over and laughing loud in the kitchen, carefree, never worrying about bills or who made it all possible. The next morning, I drove to the county records office in Brooklyn Park, a drab concrete building with flickering fluorescent lights that made everyone look drained. I grabbed a number and waited, listening to the hum of the air vents and the rustling of paperwork. When my turn came, the clerk pulled up the deed on her computer screen. She read off the names. Mine came first. I nodded, confirming what I already knew. As I walked out, I sat in my truck, leaning my forehead against the steering wheel. For a brief moment, I questioned if I was going too far. Then my phone rang. This time, it was the wedding venue. "Mr. Harris," the woman said, calm but firm. "We're calling because there's confusion about the rehearsal dinner location." "There's no confusion," I said. "The house is being sold." There was a pause. "Well," she replied carefully, without confirmation from the homeowner and proof of insurance, "we can't proceed." "I understand," I said. Hanging up, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from the rush of adrenaline. Now it was real. The consequences were bigger than hurt feelings or angry texts. Later that afternoon, I returned to work. I climbed a ladder at a strip mall and rewired a lighting panel, my hands moving mechanically. Strip, twist, cap. I was on autopilot. During my break, I ate a dry turkey sandwich in my truck while watching a young couple argue in the parking lot. The woman waved her arms. The man stared at the ground. I couldn't help but wonder which one I had been all these years. That evening, Jessica texted me, "You're ruining everything. You always do this. You make it all about you." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. I remembered a time when she called me from college, crying because her car wouldn't start. I had driven 2 hours in a snowstorm to pick her up, didn't even think twice. "You're my hero," she'd said, half joking, half serious. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my insurance agent, Rebecca, someone I'd known for years. "John, everything okay?" she asked. "I'm selling the house." I told her I need to make some changes. She guided me through it, calm and professional. By the end of the call, another piece of my life had quietly been pulled away. Later that night, Sarah showed up again. She didn't knock this time, just stood outside my truck in the motel parking lot, her gaze steady through the window. "You're hurting, Jessica," she said. "I didn't start this." I replied. "You're her father," she said. I said softly, "until I wasn't." Her lips tightened. "You're enjoying this," she spat. I shook my head. "I'm surviving it." She leaned closer. "If you keep going, there's no coming back." I looked at her, really looked. "You already made that decision," I said. "You just didn't think I'd accept it." She stepped back, as if I'd physically pushed her. 2 days later, I got the first offer on the house. It was slightly below asking price. James called me, his voice cautious. "We can counter." "Accepted," I said. "You sure?" "Yes." Hanging up, I felt a weight in my chest, not dread, but finality. Jessica's wedding dress was still hanging in the spare bedroom closet. I remembered putting the rod in myself. I pictured it there, untouched, waiting for a day that seemed farther away with every decision I made. That night, alone in the motel, I pulled out an old photo from my wallet. Jessica at 17, sitting in the driver's seat of my truck, smiling like she'd won something. I sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the vending machine down the hall. Disappearing wasn't about punishment, I realized. It was about letting go of the idea that love, once given, would always be returned. And once I saw that clearly, there was no turning back. The sale closed on a Tuesday morning. I know because I remember the sound the pen made as I signed the last page. A soft scratch. James slid the papers toward me, tapped the corner into a neat stack, and said, "That's it. That's it. 12 years of mortgage payments. 12 winters of shoveling. 12 summers of mowing the lawn while Jessica sat on the porch, scrolling through her phone, asking me if I'd seen her sunglasses." I walked out of the title office and into a parking lot full of regular cars. A minivan honked nearby. A man argued with his phone. Life kept going, oblivious of the fact that something I'd built was officially no longer mine. James clapped me lightly on the shoulder. "You okay?" "I will be," I said. I mostly believed it. Before I even reached the end of the block, my phone started buzzing. Sarah first. "What did you do?" She demanded, breathless. "I sold the house." "You can't." "I did." She fell silent, then softened. "The wedding venue called me." I figured they would. "They canceled the rehearsal dinner," she said. "They said they can't move forward without the property." I pictured Jessica's binder, those color-coded tabs, the minute-by-minute timelines. I saw her stand in the kitchen, phone press her ear, trying to steady her voice. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it in the only way that mattered. "You're destroying her dream," Sarah said. "No," I replied, "I'm stepping out of it." By afternoon, everything was falling apart. The floor was canceled. The band was gone. The caterer left a voicemail asking who was now responsible for the unpaid balance. Eiley called me from a number I didn't recognize. I heard from Sarah. I answered before I could stop myself. "You sold the house," she yelled. "Asterisk, are you insane?" "I warned you I was disappearing," I replied calmly. "You did this on purpose." "Yes," I acknowledged. The truth was finally out in the open. "You're ruining my wedding," she cried. I closed my eyes for a moment, and for just a second, I could almost see her as an 8-year-old, clutching my hand in a mall parking lot, terrified of getting lost. "This isn't revenge," I said softly. "It's consequences." She hung up. That evening, Sarah showed up at the motel once again. She sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders slumped, staring down at the carpet. "She's embarrassed," Sarah said. "Everyone knows." "Everyone knew I existed, too," I replied, "until they didn't want me to." She looked up, her eyes red. "I never thought you'd go this far. I never thought you'd nod," I said. The room went still. 2 days later, the buyer scheduled an open house for the weekend. Yard signs, balloons tied to the mailbox, strangers wandering through rooms that had once been filled with my life. Jessica showed up during one of the showings. I wasn't there, but the neighbors told me later. Voices raised, doors slammed, a woman crying on the front steps while people pretended not to notice. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "John, it's Mike from next door. Just checking in. Didn't seem right you not being around." I stared at the text for longer than I should have. A neighbor noticed my absence before my own family did. The wedding was officially postponed the following Monday. Postponed? They said, as if waiting long enough could make it come back. Jessica posted a vague message online about toxic people and setting boundaries. Sarah stopped texting altogether. I moved out of the motel and into a small rental on the edge of town. 1 bedroom. Thin walls, a porch barely big enough for a chair. The first night there, I sat in that chair, listening to the hum of traffic. No shouting, no wedding plans, no binder, just quiet. But the quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. I knew they thought the story was over, that I'd made my point and would fade into background, like they always wanted. They were wrong, because while the house was empty, something else was taking shape. Something I'd been building slowly, quietly, over long nights and early mornings. I wasn't leaving chaos behind. I was leaving the truth. And soon, they have no choice but to open the door and face it. The buyers took possession on a Friday morning. I didn't go to the house while they moved in. I didn't need to. I had already been there earlier that week, standing alone in an empty room with the faint smell of dust and lemon cleaner in the air. I walked through slowly, touching nothing, listening to my footsteps echo like I was walking through someone else's memory. I brought 1 box. It wasn't heavy, just paper. I placed it on the kitchen counter, exactly where Sarah used to lay out bills and where Jessica spread her binders. The counter still had a faint scratch from the time I dropped a screwdriver years ago. I had meant to sand it down, but never got around to it. Inside the box was a single binder, thick, black, the kind accountants use. On the spine were block letters I'd written myself. What disappears inside were tabs, clean, labeled, mortgage payments, insurance and utilities, education and medical expenses, wedding costs, extras. Each section held copies of checks, statements, notes in my handwriting, dates, amounts, no opinions, no insults, just facts. On top of the binder, I placed a single envelope addressed to Jessica, not Sarah. Jessica. I stood there for a long time after setting it down, long enough to hear a car pass outside, long enough to feel the weight of the years settle in my shoulders. Then I left. I didn't tell anyone I'd been there. The call came that afternoon. It wasn't Sarah. It was Jessica's fiancé, David. I'd met him twice, polite, quiet, the kind of guy who let things happen around him and called it peace. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. "Open it," I said. There was a pause, paper shifting, a sharp breath. "Jesus," he muttered. Sarah must have been there too, because I could hear her crying in the background. Jessica's voice rose, sharp and panicked. "This is manipulative," she cried. "He planned this." I took the phone off speaker and held it to my ear. I documented it. I said, "There's a difference. You're trying to embarrass us," Sarah sobbed. I'm telling the truth. I replied for the first time, publicly. They were in the house then, the empty one, neighbors drifting by. The new owners wouldn't arrive until the next day. The kitchen was wide open, sunlight spilling over the counter where the binder lay. I pictured Jessica flipping through the binder, her fingers landing on numbers that might have flown under her radar before: the $1,250 monthly mortgage payment, the 4.2% interest rate I locked in 12 years ago, the $6,800 for her braces, the $1,400 deposit for the venue, the florist, the band, the alterations, everything coming from the same account. Under the extras section, I added things she might have forgotten: gas money for her college trips home, insurance deductibles, that winter when I covered her rent after her roommate bailed. At the end of the binder, there was a letter. 1 page, nothing long. Jessica, you asked me to disappear. This is what disappears when I do. There's no anger here, just accounting. I hope your wedding day is still beautiful. I won't be there to see it. John. I could hear David breathing heavily on the other end. Did you know about all this? He asked Jessica. Silence. The quiet felt louder than any shouting could have. Neighbors were out on the sidewalk. Mike from next door stood with his arms crossed, pretending to check his phone, but obviously listening. Someone whispered. Another shook their head. Sarah's voice cracked. John, please. You've made your point. I didn't make a point. I answered. I just answered a request. Then Jessica screamed. Not words, just a raw, furious sound. The phone went dead. Later, I heard from Mike about what happened. Jessica threw the binder across the room. Pages scattered, fluttering like leaves in the wind. David picked them up one by one. The neighbors watched from a polite distance, the way people in the Midwest do, concerned, curious, yet holding back. A woman from across the street remarked, I always thought John paid for everything. Mike nodded. He did. By the time evening rolled around, the story had spread. Church friends, wedding guests, and those who'd wonder why the wedding had been postponed. There was no rumor to correct. The truth was already laid out on the counter, tab, organized, and clear. Sarah tried calling me again that night. I didn't pick up. Instead, I sat on the porch of my small rental, a folding chair pulled up to the railing. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of rusted copper. In the distance, a lawn mower hummed. A dog barked once, then quieted. For the first time in weeks, my hands weren't shaking. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. The next morning, I received an email from David. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I don't think we're ready to get married. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Sarah sent me one last message later that day. I wish you'd fought harder. I typed a single reply. I did. Quietly, for years. That was the last thing I said to her. By Sunday, the binder was gone. The new owners had moved in. The counter was theirs now, but the story had already served its purpose. Once the numbers are seen, you can't unsee them. Once the weight someone carried in silence is set out in the open, it stays there. They asked me to disappear. What shocked them wasn't that I left. It was how much vanished with me. I didn't hear from them for a long time after that. Weeks turned into months, the kind where the seasons change quietly and you don't notice until the air feels different on your skin. Summer quietly bled into fall. Leaves began to gather along the curb outside my rental, curling and browning, as though they were finally tired of holding on. I settled into a rhythm, waking up at 5:30 every morning, just like I had for years. The coffee maker, old and noisy, still worked. I drank my first cup while standing by the window, watching headlights float by like a slow-moving river. Some mornings, I missed the house, the garage, the way the sun hit the kitchen table just right around 7 o'clock. Other mornings, I didn't. Work stayed steady. My hands still buzzed at night, but I slept better than I had in years. No wedding deadlines. No tension humming through the walls. Just quiet, honest exhaustion. One afternoon in October, Mike stopped by. He found my new address through a mutual friend. Standing on my porch, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, he shifted his weight, then spoke. Just wanted to say, He began, "A lot of people saw what you did. I waited." "Not the selling part," he continued. "The other part, the binder, the truth." I nodded. "They don't talk about it much," he said, "but they noticed." After he left, I sat back in my chair and looked at the trees. For the first time, I understood something I'd been too busy to notice before. Respect doesn't announce itself. It quietly shows up after everything else has fallen away. Sarah tried one last time, near Thanksgiving. She showed up at my door without calling. Her coat pulled tight around her, her eyes tired. "I didn't think you'd really go through with it," she said. "I did," I replied. She glanced past me, into the small living room, second-hand couch, the lamp I'd repaired myself, the space that was entirely mine now. "You seem different," she remarked. "I am." She nodded then, the same small nod. But this time it didn't hurt. It didn't matter anymore. "I hope you're happy," she said. "I'm at peace," I responded. She left without another word. That winter, I bought a place of my own, smaller than the old house, paid for outright, a modest porch, a yard just big enough to rake without complaining. On the first night there, I sat outside with a mug of tea, watching the sun sink behind the trees. No applause, no audience, just quiet. I thought about Jessica sometimes, but not with anger, just with a kind of distant sadness. I hope she learned something. I hope she didn't have to lose as much as I did to understand it. But that part wasn't mine anymore. What I took with me wasn't money, property, or vindication. I took my dignity. I took my time. I took the truth of who I was and who I had always been. They asked me to disappear. What they never understood was this. When you push someone out who's been holding everything together, you don't just lose them. You lose the weight they carried in silence. If this story spoke to you, if you ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or quietly erased, know this. You're not alone. Sometimes, the strongest response isn't a shout back. Sometimes it's choosing yourself. If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, told honestly and without noise, take a moment to subscribe. Thank you for listening.